Thomas there. Now, for 2.5 years, a group of Adelaide residents have begged authorities to help deal with a neighbour's violence, abuse and vermin-riddled property. They even took out a petition pleading for someone to attend to the welfare of the children who live there. In all that time, only the RSPCA turned up to rescue the family's starving dogs. Sadly, the situation's by no means unique and reflects a welfare system in crisis. Francesca Belperio has our story.
The whole street is held to ransom because of these people.
Just a horrific situation.
There's windows broken in the house currently. The place is a pigsty.
You just don't like to admit it, but it is scary.
To anybody, it would scream crisis.
In an unnamed suburb, in an unnamed street, an unnamed family seems to have made a bad name for itself.
I can be in my yard and hear that man abuse his children inside that house. He will bang and belt on walls and doors for hours on end.
The neighbours feel like prisoners because we have to shut ourselves in too.
This isn't your average neighbourhood dispute. It's about a street of residents who have witnessed and been the victims of intimidation and abuse.
He walked into my front yard, walked up to me, would put his finger like this, went, "You're dead, bitch."
The language is absolutely foul.
Just the stench that came out from the house was just horrendous. It nearly knocked me out. The bugs and the flies and stuff just coming out of the house was ridiculous, not to mention the mess that was out the front.
It centres on a family of 5, mum, dad and 3 young children who moved into the area 3 years ago.
I've got a grandchild that comes here and I'm afraid they're going to hurt him.
The neighbours also fear for the welfare of the children involved. Jo, for instance, has seen things she wished she hadn't.
I've seen the youngest child get kicked by the father in the stomach in the front yard so fiercely that she flew across the yard on the ground. I've also seen him grab her by the hair because she wasn't walking fast enough and drag her across the road.
She says she rarely sees the children go to school.
They're not at school often. They weren't at school yesterday and they weren't sick because they were out riding around on their scooters.
And on another occasion, she was forced to provide a safe house to the children when she says an intruder entered the family's house wielding a gun.
He walked into the house, beat up the father, took a computer and some other stuff and left. And meanwhile, we were harbouring the children over here because they were frightened.
I have witnessed on a couple of occasions when the fathers abused the young boy on the way to school, and yes, he swore at him and belittled him. Yeah, in fact, it really upsets me when I hear it.
Alec and Jean have lived in the quiet suburban street for more than 30 years. They too hold grave fears for the children.
If you're a human and you've got feelings and you love your children, you've got to feel nothing but contempt for these people.
So how many times have you made complaints to Families SA?
It must be hundreds of times the neighbours have rung Child Abuse Hotline. You'd think that something would come from it.
These concerns are backed up by others in the street, some fearing retribution.
You just got to look at them to know they haven't been eating properly, and they're wearing the same clothes from day to day. That's not any life for children.
What makes things seem worse is the RSPCA, when called by the neighbours to check on the 2 starving family pets, promptly removed them.
The lucky dogs.
Yeah.
Very lucky dogs, because they're going to get a better life than those kids are going to have.
However, there was no such sign of intervention when it came to the children, despite repeated calls and letters to Families SA, senior ministers, the Premier and police. More recently, 30 residents signed a petition to get the attention of welfare agencies.
You have a whole street of people here who are desperately sorry for these children.
But their futile efforts left them with no other choice than to seek help from us, the media, and independent MLC, Anne Bressington.
You know, kids that are removed that shouldn't be removed, and kids that aren't removed that absolutely should be. And it's that contradiction that makes it so hard to understand what function this department actually serves.
No one can say they don't know.
How does a whole community make hundreds of notifications about the welfare of 3 children and it goes unnoticed?
and called a community meeting to get a true measure of the feelings of residents in the street.
From what I've heard, these children are at dire risk. They're at imminent risk, and the law states that if there's reasonable suspicion of a child at imminent risk, they must be removed.
This is just one of the countless stories coming to the attention of politicians, and Bressington knows all too well the despair of what she dubs the foster generations, reinforced in a damning report released in November by the Select Committee on Families SA.
Families SA was described throughout that report as a pervasive and toxic culture. We have literally a filing cabinet full of cases where we've had complaints made about Families SA.
The report describes Families SA as a system in crisis, run by a rotten culture of power without accountability, and fails in its attempts to prevent or intervene in the lives of vulnerable families.
The government needs to understand that they need to take note of what's been said, and they need to do something about it, and they need to do something about it now.
Social worker Tony Tonkin gave evidence to the committee, and not surprisingly, he says there's a staffing crisis.
They're indoctrinated very quickly into a system which doesn't represent social work very well. Some are not qualified social workers, but they're given the title social worker.
How many families will be better off if the government takes this report seriously?
Thousands. Thousands.
Make sure that our children are safe and protected.
The department informed us that they had been in contact with the family since September and were addressing the issues.
Act now. It's not going to be enough to save your face on this, because there are more to come.
Whatever the future of this family, there's no shortage of other cases forgotten or abandoned by Families SA.
It's appalling, and Families SA have a lot to answer for.
Well, the father of the family in our story has contacted us and indicated that he doesn't accept the concerns raised by his neighbour's affair. He says that his children are cared for and steps have already been taken to clean up the house.